I think you want to make sure those total pressures and that pass rush win percentage number is higher, because those are kind of like the play-by-play basis stats, and Lartu absolutely helps you raise both of those stats in a huge way. So
welcome back to another episode of Georgeonsports with me, your host George, and returning to the show is the main man, lead draft analyst for PFF, Trevor Sikkema. Trevor, how are you? And thank you for joining the show once again.
George, I'm fantastic, man. I appreciate you you having me back on the show. Excited to talk all things football, a little NFL draft steals with you, man. It's gonna be fun.
For sure. Now, for people who don't know, Trevor's been on the show, obviously, like I mentioned a couple of times before, but we were actually able to meet in Vegas for the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers, which was amazing. Produced some great content too. But I'm curious to know, Trevor, how was it for you the whole Super Bowl week? I mean, it was my first time in Vegas. It was my first Super Bowl, my first media row. But what was it like for you and the team?
Yeah, that was my first experience during Super Bowl week as well, and so I was kind of taking it all in, just like you were. Man, it's kind of wild, right? I mean, it just everything that goes on. I mean, different sort of meetings with different media members. I mean, you walk into the giant media room, and it's just basically everybody. Like everybody you watch on TV, that you listen to on the radio, they are all there, and so it was kind of crazy. I got to meet a handful of new people for the first time, and obviously got to do a lot of really cool content when we were there, just because, again, it's like, hey, this is normally somebody that you might have on your podcast or your show, and they're here in person, so you get to do it in person. So it was really cool. And selfishly and personally, it's a really cool opportunity to see a lot of my friends in the business, right? I get to work with a lot of people, but covering the league nationally, a lot of those people might live in Miami or Cincinnati or New York or Texas or like wherever it is. And when we have these big events, like Super Bowl is obviously one of them, you get to see them in person. So I get to see a lot of my friends in person, and that's a really, honestly, that's the best part for me. We do a lot of really cool content, a lot of really cool things. I didn't go to the game, so I was just there for the media week stuff. So getting to see a lot of people that I love in this industry, that's always the highlight.
That's something I think, especially people outside of the US, forget. I mean, we watch people like yourselves on all these shows and the network analysts, and we forget that really you can be in two totally different places in America, whereas I just assume that everyone's very close by, which obviously isn't the case. So it makes a good point, obviously, when everyone, because I suppose Super Bowl week is pretty much everybody, like you said, everybody comes together, all different states, different networks, different programs, and it's a chance to catch up and see each other and create some amazing content. So pretty cool. It might, selfishly and personally, just like you said, for me too, to meet you and to meet a number of other people who I look up to and watch and chase for content. So it was pretty cool. A memory to last a lifetime. And I guess New Orleans is next up on the list. So that's I'm really looking forward to that one.
That's gonna be fun. I have been to New Orleans a couple of times before, and New Orleans hosting a Super Bowl is gonna be it's gonna be a time. Like Vegas, obviously, is like it's the king of all entertainment that's right there. But New Orleans, you could have some fun in New Orleans too. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Me and you both. With that, we're going to get straight into things and talk draft steals. I believe we've both got about 5 lined up in terms of who we personally think has gone down as a steal in the draft, regardless of where they've been picked in the draft. Because I've got a couple of surprises, and some people might think, hold on, that doesn't actually count. It does. So I'm going to go first, and call me biased if you like. I'm wearing the top, so I'm only going to go one way. It's the Indianapolis Colts wide receiver, Adonai Mitchell. You may have had him on your list, I'm not sure. From Texas University, he was drafted in the second round, 52nd overall. And I guess you could say, he is, in my opinion, a first-round draft talent, and he slipped for a number of different reasons. It's the draft. Things always come out in the media that may or may not be true. And in Mitchell's case, there was a lot of talk about his personality and his characteristics, which apparently led to the slide. But this guy is the real deal. 6'2", 205 pounds, 4.34 speed. He's incredibly athletic. I mean, you saw what he did at Georgia, and obviously in Texas too. Very, very twitchy, but he can create separation, particularly on his breaking in routes, which is obviously very important. And now when you plug him into an offense like the Colts, who obviously they've just signed Michael Pittman Jr. to his long-term deal, strong and up-and-coming Josh Downs, who had a great rookie season. Obviously, there's Alec Pierce there as well. But now you have Anthony Richardson, who will be back for a full season alongside Jonathan Taylor. In my opinion, that sets us up I mean, that's that. I feel like he's the missing piece on the offense we've been waiting for in terms of the wide receiver room. We've had other guys, Ashton Julian, who tore his Achilles, wasn't able to stay healthy. A number of other guys who just haven't worked out. Paris Campbell, for example, but with Adonai Mitchell, I mean, everything that I'm seeing from rookie camp and mandatory camp, he's turning heads in a big way, and he's given Anthony Richardson that extra weapon that I think is going to make us extremely explosive.
Yeah, this is somebody who was on my list as well. I wrote down, I did a little extra credit here. So I actually have 10 names because I want to make sure that we give the people as many as possible. So if you have one, I won't copy you.
Okay.
AD Mitchell was on my list, and he's somebody who I believe also was a first round type of talent, wide receiver. Like you said, I think he slid just because maybe the personality wasn't for every team. It's always really tough for me to comment on that because as an NFL draft analyst, where I am in my seat, I don't really get to know these players super well. I don't get to meet them. So it always feels very weird because that is a part of the process. And I tell people all the time, like, the people part of the scouting process is just as important than the talent. Like, who you are and what makes you tick, what drives you, holds the key to you achieving your potential, whatever your athletic potential is. So it's always tough because I preach that that's a major part of the scouting report, but I also hate talking about somebody I've never met, so that's always a really tricky part for me, especially on the negative side. If it's a judgmental thing, like if you hear like, hey, the NFL doesn't love him because, he rubs people the wrong way or whatever, it's really hard for me to say something like that. So instead, I can only look at what AD Mitchell was able to do on the field, both at Georgia and Texas. And I was like, okay, well, this is a first round wide receiver. So them getting him at number 52, absolutely a steal. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. You're now kind of completing the framework of what is a total package of trio of wide receivers, with Michael Pittman Jr. playing the X and AD Mitchell being a flanker off the line of scrimmage and Josh Downs being a stud in the slot. Like all of that is there for them. So they've got a really well-rounded receiver trio in it.
Yeah. The other thing that I really like about this pick is Chris Ballard was one of the first guys to back the guy, if you like, to get behind him and talk about how well he thinks he's going to do in the team and put all the kind of the supposed negativity away, which kind of reinforces as well to Mitchell himself that I'm actually wanted here, which, I mean, it might not seem like a big thing now, but from a player who's, supposedly had these issues, whether that's happened or not, to hear the GM of the team you've been drafted by, sing your praises and back you day in, day out in front of the press goes a long way in terms of building that relationship. So I couldn't be happier with this pick, and I think he's going to do a lot for us, especially in the RPO game. Who have you got?
So my number one guy, I have to pick the player who I think was the greatest value for any team, and that was Cooper DeJean, the cornerback from Iowa, going to Philadelphia Eagles at number 40. I mean, it's crazy to me that he lasted all the way to 40. I understand that there are some concerns about him having the speed or flexibility to be able to play on the outside full time, but even if, the way that I explain it to people is, okay, is Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell, like, are they a little bit more twitchy on the outside? Like, do you have more faith in them to maybe be able to play man coverage on the outside better than Cooper? Yeah, okay, like, I could believe that. But if you're an off coverage, like cover 3 or quarters type of a team, you don't really have to worry about that too much. I mean, Cooper's got plenty of athleticism, especially like explosiveness, to be able to keep up with people if you give him a little bit of that space. And I think that he is somebody who could be sticky in man coverage, but even if you're not playing on the outside at all times, he could be a stud in the slot for you because he's 6'1", 205 pounds. He's the best tackling cornerback that we had in this draft. And anytime that you play closer to the line of scrimmage, you have to be able to tackle. And when you're in the slot, you are closer to the line of scrimmage. So I think there's a lot of people out there that go, oh, okay, well, this guy's not big enough to play as an outside corner. Let me just move him in the slot. Well, it doesn't really work exactly like that. If they can't tackle, they can't play in the slot, not at the NFL level. Teams will target exactly where they are, and they'll run straight at you because they know that you can't fit the run. Cooper DeJean can fit the run. And of course, if you were to play him in a safety role as well, the ball skills, the instinct, how he sees the field, what he is as a returner once he gets the ball in his hand, just unbelievable. Top tier athleticism stuff. Really great high school athletic background in track and basketball and in football. He was everything. And I think that you see a blend of those things on the field. So to me, he he's not quite the outside corner that Jalen Ramsey is,
Hmm.
but think of how Jalen Ramsey has been used throughout his career when he was with Los Angeles, and then
Yeah.
when he has been in Miami as well. They'll use him as an outside corner, they'll use him in the slot, they'll use him as a safety, just wherever it is most advantageous to them. And I think that Cooper DeJean can play a similar type role where he has that kind of versatility to him. So he was my number 8 overall player. Philly gets him at number 40, so it has to be one of the biggest deals of the draft for me.
The other thing about that is, as well, I don't know if you will have more information on this than me, but the Eagles haven't picked a cornerback with the first pick in a very, very long time, I believe. And picking Cooper DeJean obviously goes a long way to explain and reinforce that.
Yeah, let me see when the last time.
Yeah, it was quite a while.
Because obviously they picked Quignon, so they picked Quignon at 22. But before him, man, when's the last time they picked a corner in the first round?
I read something.
They picked Sidney Jones in the second round in 2017. They picked Eric Rowe in the second round in 2015.
It's been a number of years, to say the least.
Juwan Jarrett in 2011 in the second round. Nate Allen in the second round. Well, I mean, we're going way far back for a corner at this point. We're going before the year 2000, I think. Oh, and Lito Shepherd. Lito Shepherd, I think, was the last one here. In 2002, They picked Lito Shepherd.
So over 20 years. Overall. There you go. And that speaks volumes, right, in terms of how much they believe in him and what they think he can bring to the team. So, I mean, I'm excited to see how he does. He's been in all the headlines. He was someone who I felt the same, but didn't want to add him to my list just because I wanted to try and find some others. And I thought maybe you might have had him. So I still tried to stay clear. So I've got another wide receiver. I've got Troy Franklin.
Nice.
Wide receiver in the 4th round, 102nd pick, obviously with the Denver Broncos now. And a lot of this bodes on the fact that he has the connection with the Oregon QB, Bo Nix. And I mean, I think all you have to do is look at the tape. They have the relationship. They know each other's play style. They know how each other like to receive the ball and where he likes to, where Bo Nix likes to receive the ball in different pockets. And for them, now both being on the Denver Broncos, where you have to let Jerry Jeudy's already made his way to the Browns, Cortland Sutton wants a new deal. What happens there, we're not too sure. So if you look at this situation, he's someone, Troy Franklin, who could be utilized almost immediately. And having that existing relationship with your college quarterback, who is now, I mean, this isn't to say that he's going to, become the number 1 quarterback right away, but you would imagine with Bo Nix at the helm and Troy Franklin as a wide receiver, this is something that could become pretty special pretty quickly.
I like Troy Franklin a lot. He is somebody who I thought could have been a back end of the 1st round pick. I certainly thought that he would be a 2nd round pick. He ends up being a 4th round pick, beginning of the 4th round. To me, major steal as well. So I think it's a good shout out for you. I think the quarterback connection with Bo Nix and with Troy Franklin is going to be key. I also like what he is sort of as a vertical stretching receiver, but I also like what he could be after the catch too. So, you've still got Marvin Mims on the roster.
Yes.
You still have Cortland Sutton that's there. And again, like that's a decent trio now that you have for Bo Nix to kind of throw the ball to. And it's very nice that he has a very familiar face to get acclimated with and get that confidence down. Because if you watch Bo Nix at Auburn versus Oregon, I think the biggest difference is it's not like Nix was any less talented when he was at Auburn. It was confidence. He just clearly did not have a lot of confidence in those 3 years that he was starting at Auburn, where in Oregon, he felt like one of the most confident football players in the country for both years. So can you get him to be that confident player? And I think that having Troy Franklin there is a good way to do that.
Who have you got up next?
So I will go I'll stick with another receiver. We can bounce around a little bit, but I'll stick with another receiver. I'm going to go with Javon Baker, the wide receiver from UCF, going to the New England Patriots in the beginning of the 4th round as well. So he goes pick 110. He is somebody who I think talent-wise should have been a day 2 pick. He ends up going at the early parts of day 3. And I think he's going to be huge for New England because they need receivers to be able to step up. And I think there's a world where Jalen Polk, who they also drafted in the 2nd round, is going to be a big contributor for them. But Baker can be as well. Baker, he's not just kind of like some product from UCF that was an afterthought, that was just like a product of UCF's air raid system. Like, this was somebody who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He was at Alabama for a couple of years, ended up transferring over to UCF. I think there were some, he just wasn't happy when he was at Alabama for whatever reason. It becomes a immediate high volume guy when he got to the Knights, and I think that he's got the total package, man. He's not the biggest dude in the world, but I think
No.
he's got plenty of size. He's really twitchy. I think he's got good long speed. He's just got a ton of really impressive all around game. Kind of reminded me of DJ Moore. Now, obviously, DJ Moore was thought of a lot more because he was drafted in the first round, but
Yeah.
maybe didn't have that refinement to him or just that overall talent ceiling, but similar archetype of a player who I feel like can do it all for you. So to me, I think he's going to prove, even in his rookie year, that he was a steal for the Patriots, because I think he's going to get a lot of looks. He's going to have a chip on his shoulder for being a day 3 pick, because it seems like the quotes and some of the talk of him at camp already has been like, "Hey, I'm here to outplay my draft position. I'm here to prove everybody wrong." So I love a wide receiver that's motivated like that, and I think he'll be able to show it this year.
And then you look at the rest of the receivers in their lineup too. So you've got Douglas, Thornton, Polk, obviously you mentioned who they drafted before. So you're right. I think there is a very high chance that similar to Troy Franklin can have a very quick and immediate impact in the squad. And I mean, the Patriots are a strange one for me because clearly, I mean, whether people use the word rebuilding or not, there is a huge change there. And obviously, Drake May at the helm now, but they've also got Brissett there, I believe, too, who is very experienced. I know that firsthand. He was our quarterback for a decent amount of time and can perform. So I'm looking forward to see what they can do with their couple of wide receiver picks, because, it's a new day and it's a new dawn for the Patriots. I find that one very, very interesting. I am going to go on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going linebacker. I'm going with guy Peyton Wilson, who I'm sure you have heard of many times over. He is now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, pick number 3 at the 98th spot. Now, this pick is similar to another guy I'm going to mention later, but injuries, right? Injuries are a part of the NFL, whether you like it or not. College football, NFL, injuries play a big part, and this was the case for Peyton. So, in my opinion, I feel like he would have been a first-round pick if not for these injuries I'm referring to. He played, on the flip side, he played every game over the last 2 seasons. So the whole noise about the injuries have kind of faded away slightly, and enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers to pick him up. 30 tackles, 15 and a half tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions in the last season gone. And all you have to do is watch the tape, right? We talk about how the tape doesn't lie. And you will know that firsthand as a lead draft analyst. And he's someone who absolutely sticks out like a sore thumb. He reminds me of someone who just hustles and grinds. I mean, dare I say it, his work ethic and motor kind of reminds me of a TJ Watt, which is funny because they're now on the same team. So if you look at that setup, you have him lined on the edge, and you have TJ Watt in the linebacker spot, and TJ Watt on the edge. You're looking at a lot of trouble for opposing offenses. And for me, I feel like this is quite a steal, because if these injuries really are behind him, they've got a real one. I mean, he's a dog. He is an absolute dog.
He was on my list as well. I figured one of us were going to mention him because, to me, he was LB1 in this class.
Yeah.
I had him as like my 28th overall player. And the top linebacker to have. Now, the reports kind of going into the draft was that, he suffered a lot of injuries. He suffered, I think, a couple of knee injuries, a shoulder injury, and obviously not great for linebackers specifically. It's not great for anybody, but it's not great for linebackers specifically, because your job as a linebacker is you have to make contact on every play, right? So there's not even any plays that your body gets to take off. But, there were reports earlier or before the draft where somebody was like, yeah, I mean, he basically doesn't have an ACL at this point. Like, he's playing without an ACL. And it's like, okay, well, did the ACL vanish after this past year? Because if he was playing with no ACL this past year, guess what? He was the best linebacker in the country. So, put a brace on it, wrap it up, do whatever you need to do that you did this past year. And he was the best linebacker in the country still. So it's not like, again, it's not like the ACL vanished over the last couple of months. Like, I think that this was sort of something that he played through this past season, and he clearly was able to play really well. So, look, longevity, okay, I get it, but he was the best linebacker in the class. So, for him to last all the way to 98, I think that was a great pickup there for the Steelers.
Yeah.
So, I think that Wilson can start for them pretty quickly.
I was very impressed. Honestly, the tape it jumps out, and it's hard to kind of miss someone like that with that kind of engine and motor, even if they don't have an ACL. Who do you have up next?
So I'll go to the offensive line. I'm going to go with Cedric Van Prom, the center from Georgia, who Buffalo drafted in the 5th round at 141. This is a big time draft steal for me, because when you look at Van Prom, is he the most fleet of foot? No. Do you want him doing outside zone blocking all the time? No. Okay. But look at what he does well. If he's in these like man gap power situations from that center spot, he's great in duo. He brings a ton of power to his game. He's imposing. He can move people off the ball. But the thing that I love the most about Cedric Van Prom is Georgia trusted this guy at a very young age. It was either his true freshman or redshirt freshman season to be their starting center for their national championship runs over the last 3 years. I mean, to do that at Georgia, to me, is really impressive, because it's one thing to say that at other programs. It's another thing to say it at Georgia, which is just an absolute talent factory at every position every single year, as you can see by their back-to-back national championships. And honestly, if Georgia got into the playoffs this year, they might have won a third one. It would have been a hell of a matchup between them and Michigan, I think, but they could have won a third one. And Cedric Van Prom was right in the middle of that offensive line for all 3 years. That experience, that leadership, the qualities that Kirby Smart and the rest of that coaching staff clearly saw within him to say, you're going to be the centerpiece and the leader of our offensive line. That to me means a ton. So even beyond just the fact that I think he's really good in man gap and power situations, even if you want to say, okay, he's not the most athletic guy in the world, and the NFL level is about being a good athlete, being that centerpiece, I think just carries so much weight. So to get a guy like that in the 5th round, with that mindset, that approach to the game, that experience, that success level in college, to me, I think that's a big steal for Buffalo.
Oh, massively. I mean, it speaks volumes. So the other thing that I think makes a lot of sense in this pick is you touched on it, the leadership element. Yes, he's a mauler. Yes, he's a dog. Yes, he can grind, in the play schemes, especially on the interior. But for me, when you look at Buffalo, outside of Josh Allen, obviously we've seen what's happened with all the drama. Stiggs is now gone, and they're not revamping, but they're adding pieces here and there. And to have a guy like that who, at such a young age, like you said, developed that leadership and leader mentality at Georgia, what a program to do it at. To then come into the Buffalo Bills and be that kind of second, not to leapfrog Josh. Josh is obviously Josh Allen. He's the main man there, but to have that presence, that maturity, the wiseness of a guy in the interior as well, which is an extremely, extremely valuable position, goes a long way. And I feel like that fit works really well with Buffalo, because I feel like they need that. They need to find some kind of calm and some kind of structure, because it felt like things were going a bit all over the place with Buffalo. So that is a great steal. That's another good pick that I did see. I didn't quite add him to my list, but who I did add to my list, sticking with the defensive side of the ball. Once again, people can call me biased, because this one is a little bit tricky. I've gone Lartu. Now, I'll say this. He was a first-round pick. I get it. This show is about steals. I get it. However, Lartu, for me, if you, again, injury is part of the game, if you almost bypass that, which is hard to do because, as you know, he was medically forced to retire. Had the neck issue and he thought it was over. Balled out at UCLA. If you kind of remove that and look at what he was able to do since, he was able to play a handful of games solidly and consistently. He's the best natural pass rusher in the draft. No question. He has a deep pass rushing bag, incredible first step. And now he's on the defensive line that recorded 51 sacks last season, which puts them 5th best in the league. That's not a stat you often hear from a team like the Colts. They racked up the sacks last season, and they were doing quite well on that defensive line with Ebukam and Buckner and Grover Stewart and Quick Pay and Dairo Dengbo. Then you've got the linebackers who, in my opinion, are some of the top 2, EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin, who, in my opinion, don't get enough respect. Now you add a guy who can finish plays, who can create quarterback pressures and slid. I say slid. He was the first defensive player off the board at 15. So that's the only reason why I have him as a steal, because someone of that talent, for me, is a top 5 pick. But I understand the neck injury, the medically forced to retire. A lot of people will look at that and slide that all the way down. But in the meantime, whilst he was out, he was playing rugby. I don't know how many people know this, but he went and played rugby. I'm not too sure where it was, but he played full contact sport and kept active to the point where he's ready to go. And everything I'm hearing from the rookie minicamp, once again, similar to Mitchell, is he is a difference maker. And I can't wait to see this guy ball. Honestly, I haven't stopped talking about Lartu because he's such a gem. And again, for me, a massive, massive steal.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Colts, they were, I think, 2nd or 3rd in the league in sacks.
Yeah.
But they were much lower in pass rush win percentage. Like they were barely top 10 in pass rush win
It was
percentage.
bad.
And when it came to like total pressures in the league, they were 28th. So yeah, they came up with a lot of sacks, but I think you want to make sure those total pressures and that pass rush win percentage number is higher, because those are kind of like the play-by-play basis stats, and Lartu absolutely helps you raise both of those stats in a huge way. So huge get for Indianapolis. I think in other draft classes, he's an easy top 10 pick. This draft was just so loaded at offensive players. It kind of forced him down the board. So for the Colts to get him at 15, I think they were even shocked that they got him at 15.
Massively. I saw Chris Ballard's face and he couldn't believe it. We'll go one more each quickly before we wrap things up. So I'll go with you and then I'll close out.
Okay. So then I'll go to the player that I have who was drafted the lowest that I have on this list. Kansas State offensive lineman KT Leviston going to the Los Angeles Rams at pick number 254 in the 7th round. I think this is a big time steal because this is somebody who has played tackle. I believe he's played right and left tackle. I think he's got the frame, the mentality, the strength to also be able to play guard. And I think it's on a Rams offensive line where he's going to have an opportunity to maybe not start this upcoming year, but be a really good reserve swing offensive lineman who can maybe get a starting spot at offensive tackle or even offensive guard someday for this team. I know they just signed some guards that they're excited about. So, Kevin Dotson, Jonah Jackson, those guys are going to start there. Steve Avila is going to start at center, but maybe one of those offensive tackle spots are going to open up one day. And I think that, picking a guy like Leviston as a reserve player, somebody who's played so much football over the last couple of years for Kansas State and just is solid, man. He's just really solid. He's not the best athlete in the world, but I think he's a player who, are some faster NFL guys going to maybe get the better of him? Sure. I think you'll have a handful of snaps that are like that. But on a play-by-play basis, I think he's going to be so steady for you. The floor for him, I think, is pretty dang high. Yeah. And so for him to be your reserve offensive tackle and for you to get a player like that in the 7th round, to me, big time steal. I felt like he could have been a 5th or even 4th round draft selection. They get him in the 7th round, almost at the very, very end of the draft. So KT Leviston going to the Rams, really nice pick by them.
Every time I hear about an O-lineman in the draft, I always think about what the Chargers' new head coach, Harbaugh, always talks about in terms of the offensive line are the only unit on the team who just need to depend on themselves to do well. Everybody else needs to depend on every other role. And sometimes I feel like, the trenches isn't spoken about enough. It's obviously so key, so pivotal. And when you get a guy like that late in the draft, who we always talk about chip on the shoulder, we mentioned it on the show, he will be wanting to prove himself. And what better way to do it than in the trenches where he has a chance to shine and show what he can do, given all the experience that he does have. So, no, another great pick for sure. There are actually so many, and it's a point I'll come to just before we close about where you hit and don't hit in the draft. But that is for sure a big steal, especially at that position. So I will close things out with the 150th pick overall. Played at South Carolina and is now with the Saints. It's quarterback Spencer Rattler. Now, it's an interesting one because, in my opinion, I'll just say this. I feel like he has a decent shot to get some real playing time this season. Derek Carr's obviously there at the Saints, but I do feel like with his skill set, what he can do and the weapons that are already at the Saints, I feel like there is a good chance that with the way Derek Carr's career has been going, Rattler will get some decent game time. Again, another pick where it was kind of influenced by the outside world. Some reports suggest that teams weren't too impressive because of how he came across in the QB1 documentary series, and he ended up falling to the 5th round. But reports say that he's turning heads. Obviously, you've seen the clips online of the target balls to certain receivers, and it's got some of the coaches' heads turning. And he was already regarded as one of the better QBs in the draft, aside from all the issues outside and the external noise. So the Saints, I think, will be feeling good that they've managed to get a guy like this in the 5th round who's potentially ready to go. And like I said, I think we'll get some real game time this season. Not to say that I think he's going to, unseat Derek Carr. Could that happen? Potentially. It's the NFL. Anything can happen. But I do feel like Spencer, as a 5th round pick, given what he's done, all the experience he's had, I think he's got a good shot of earning some game time this season. And how far that could go, we've got to wait and see.
I'm very shocked that Spencer Rattler was a 5th round pick. I think that Spencer Rattler should have been a back end of day 2 type of quarterback. And when I looked at this draft, I thought there were a handful of quarterbacks that were going to go in the first round, or at least in the top 40. I figured that all the guys who ended up going in the top 12, they were all going to go in the top 40 at some point. They all ended up going in the top 12, which is crazy. But I thought if there was a quarterback in this draft, normally I do not love the idea of drafting a quarterback in the second or third round, because if you're going to draft them in the second or third round, do you think they're good enough to be a first rounder or not? Like it's a weird, I don't really think there's a lot of quarterbacks that work out in that regard. Some obviously do. I think people will be able to give me examples. I'm not saying that there's any, but just the philosophical way that you view it. It's like the quarterback position, you almost have to scout completely different from any other position. Is he a first rounder? Do you think he could be a starting NFL quarterback or not? Because if you think he could be a starting NFL quarterback, you're going to give him a first round grade. Exactly. You're going to draft him in the first round. If you don't think he could be a starting quarterback, you're not going to draft him until day 3. Day 2 for quarterbacks, in my opinion, it's a really, I just don't think that there are many guys who exist like that. Right. Spencer Rattler was one of them that I said, okay, I think because of certain circumstances, he's not going to be viewed as a first round pick. I would genuinely take this guy at the back end of the second round or sometime in the third. And so for him to last to the 5th round, I think was crazy. I thought that was wild that he ended up lasting all the way to that point, because I think he has a lot of arm talent. And I think that NFL teams could not get over the background of Spencer, of what he was in college and who he was on the QB1 documentary and the hothead that it was reported that he was when he was at Oklahoma. Because I can tell you, I've got people that I know within the South Carolina program that know the program very, very well. Spencer, from all accounts, while he was those 2 years in South Carolina, was the ultimate teammate. Hard worker, great leader, good friend, always picking everybody up, wasn't pointing the finger to blame others, just a much more mature individual. And I think that sometimes we don't let these 19 and 20-year-old kids grow up. And when they do grow up, sometimes we just have a lot of skepticism because it's really tough to get over first impressions. Spencer is one of those guys that I felt like over the last 2 years did the work to get over those bad first impressions. And I'm just very shocked because I feel like he has starting caliber traits at the NFL level. And I was shocked that he slid all the way to the 5th round, because you're right. I don't think he's going to unseat Derek Carr, but if Carr really struggles, they will go to Spencer at some point. So,
and he offers something different to Derek Carr on that too, not just the arm talent, but the scrambling ability. Right, before we close out the show, I have one question for you, and it's I guess it's a bit of an open question, but the draft itself. I mean, there's always this talk about hitting and missing in the draft. Do you think that picking players in the draft is more down to luck? If you hit, you hit, or is there there is obviously science and analytics behind it all? Do you think it's more technical than it seems, or is it just a bit of luck, or is it a bit of both in terms of who you?
Yeah, I mean, it's that and so much more. I think my answer to that question would basically be the people aspect of scouting is the part that gets underreported the most, right? We all can watch the film. We can all look at the data points. We can all tell you what a guy's ceiling might be. But at the end of the day, achieving that ceiling is not a science, right? Even like PFF, all the data that we have, we don't believe that we've cracked the code, because I don't think there is any code to crack, because every human being and every individual is different. We can identify ceilings, right? We can tell you, hey, there's not really many NFL players at tight end that make it who are shorter than 6'2", or there aren't many, running backs who make it who don't run at least a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, right? We can put all this data together and we can kind of come up with these thresholds of players that make it and players that don't. But at the end of the day, identifying the floor and identifying the ceiling are things that you can do with data and with film. But whether or not they achieve that, things go into it, like where they're going to, the coaching staff, what they're asking of them early on. Is the coaching staff listening to their strengths and weaknesses? And also, like, people forget about this. These are young human beings. Like they are going through their lives doing this. I remember, I've told the story a couple of times because I covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before I got into PFF and covered the draft full time. Ronald Jones, right? Ronald Jones, he's from Texas. Goes over to USC, There were kind of reports that he was very homesick when he was at USC, but he felt like that was the best place for his career. But he was just super homesick, so he didn't really play well his first couple of years, despite being a really high talented recruit. That junior year, he was finally like, okay, like this is my place. These are my people. He was confident. He was a monster his junior season, and then he gets drafted by the Buccaneers in the second round, and he's one of the youngest players in the class. He's like 20, 21 years old. He then moves from Los Angeles to Tampa, okay? Completely across the United States. In Tampa, he has no friends. He has no support system. His family doesn't live there. It's new teammates. And he's expected to go out and like be confident. And Ronald Jones was not a confident football player for the first 2-ish, 3 years of his time at the NFL level, in my opinion, because he just wasn't confident. It was just like there was so much going on in his life outside of football. And I think we forget about that element of, you know, think about like you and me and everybody out there listening. We all have bad days and we still got to go to work. These people have bad days and they got to go to work, and it's football, and then they get evaluated under a microscope for everything that they do. And they might just be having a bad day. They might just be having a tough time in life right there. And sometimes that happens when you're 20, 21, 22 years old, still trying to figure out life just as much as you are trying to figure out the game of football at the professional level. So there is always so much that goes into a player working out that the talent evaluation part is almost the easiest part. It's kind of the X factors that you have no control over. Even teams sometimes have no control over. Personal motivation, how self-driven they are. Are they going to become confident very quickly? Do they feel comfortable in this new city and this new team and this new life with their new teammates and everything? And that just so much of that also goes into these guys working out just as much as their talent level does.
Yeah, I actually remember quite a lot of the talk around him when he was with the Bucs, and about how he wasn't doing this right. And obviously, being at the Bucs at that time was a very high-pressured environment as well. And I remember hearing his name spoken about how he's underperforming. And little do we know, like you said, all these influences and these external factors that are weighing down on him. He's a young guy. That's the aspect, I think, as well, that we and a lot of people forget. These are young men, right? And they're still figuring out life, and they're, like you said quite rightly, moving from state to state. It's not like here in the UK, but we can drive from one part of the country to the other. You guys are having to move hours away for the game of football and to make it in your career. So no, I completely understand that for sure. And that is a very good point as to why, you know, it's not just okay, this guy has all these stats, he should work out. It doesn't always work out that way. So whoever said the NFL was easy, they lied. And with that, we're going to bring the show to an end. Trevor, another great show. I appreciate you for coming on. We have been discussing the draft steals, some of our draft steals of the 2024 draft. I have been George from Georgeonsports, here with the lead draft analyst at PFF, Trevor Sikkema, and we'll see you on the next episode.